Hi everyone, I'm Casey Frashante, professional astrologer, and I've been seeing a lot of videos on TikTok from people claiming to be astrologers, or maybe people that just don't have enough astrological education to be speaking on such topics. And these videos have really infuriated me and kind of upset me just because they really desecrate the art of astrology and they make me as an astrologer and every other great astrologer out there look bad. And there's so much misinformation about astrology. There's so much misinformation about astrologers as well. Just that, astrology isn't real, and fair enough, like anyone can make the declaration that astrology is bullshit. I can understand why people think that. The same way people can say that God doesn't exist, and that astrologers are just scammers. And this is primarily what I wanted to talk about today, because there are plenty of astrologers, people claiming to be astrologers, that are scammers, are grifters, con artists. They have no problem taking vulnerable people's money and lying to them. And I wanted to use Charlie Kirk's astrology as an example today, just of how you can kind of vet perhaps like astrologers and kind of see what they're all about. Because Charlie Kirk was like a political commentator or political influencer. I'm not really sure what his title was or what he really did. But he was assassinated a few days ago. And on my TikTok, I've just been, and look, it's probably my fault for being on TikTok in the first place. I've just been seeing a lot of videos about, yeah, astrologers, quote unquote, saying, oh, can we predict, sorry, can we predict Charlie Kirk's assassination with astrology? Yeah, we can. Here's why. He had transiting Mars conjunct his sun, and that's about it. Or people using a noon chart, which is just because he has no known birth time, so they'll be erecting his chart, setting the time as noon, which is just the midpoint of where all the planets would be on his birthday, and kind of interpreting the house cusps and interpreting the ascendant and the midheaven degree when we don't have a birth time for him, and the noon chart doesn't tell us anything about the houses in his chart. It's just where the houses were at noon. Any self-respecting astrologer would never interpret a noon chart and the houses and the angles in the noon chart because it's not valid. It means nothing. And I saw people, talking about his noon chart and how the ruler of the eighth in his noon chart was afflicted by something. And, as someone that takes astrology very seriously, I was watching, and I don't know which is worse. If it's astrologers, quote unquote, knowing that they're bullshitting and don't care because they're trying to get money or whatever they're trying to do. I don't know. Or if they're just people that they don't know and they're just making, because either way they're still trying to like con people and get money out of them, and I really don't like it. And like this wasn't just one, this was at least maybe six or seven different creators or whatever posting these videos having no idea what they're talking about. And I wanted to kind of clear that up today and give you a few examples of what you can look for if you're into astrology, as to if you don't have someone's birth time, what you can look for regarding predictive analysis. So let's take a look at Charlie's chart. So we have no known birth time for him. Astrologers are either going to erect a noon chart, so that's just setting the birth time as noon. But a solar chart is also used by many astrologers, and that just puts the ascendant degree as the degree of the sun. And, the sun in astrology represents someone's general life force. And so you're kind of looking at the chart through the scope of their sun as their life force. No astrologer is going to look at a solar erected chart and interpret the houses. That's not really the point. It's just a clear way of kind of a clear symbolic way of interpreting the placements. And we don't have his birth time, but he definitely has a Libra moon. The moon was in Libra throughout this entire day, so that's helpful for us. But again, no kind of self-respecting astrologer would look at the aspects of an individual's moon in a solar chart just because the it could be so off. It's like someone could be born at 12:05 in the morning, or they could be born at 11:55 at night on the same day, and the aspects to the moon are going to vary a lot. So yeah, so what I was seeing was just people saying, oh, he had transiting Mars conjunct his sun. that happens to everyone every 2 years. It's really not that big of a deal. Transiting Mars acts as a trigger. Mars conjunct his sun was triggering something else that was going on in his astrology on that day. And because we don't have a birth time, we can't really decipher what that can be. But through my studies, I have, and I mentioned this in quite a lot of my videos, I'm starting to really notice the importance of planetary dignity. So, and planetary dignity, that's essentially what you might hear when someone says, oh, you have the moon in Cancer, that's a really good placement for the moon. Or, oh, you have Venus in Aries, that's a really bad placement for Aries. What they're trying to say is that certain planets operate better in certain signs because they're more comfortable expressing themselves in those signs. And so the sun is in detriment in Libra. No, it's in fall in Libra because it's opposite Aries where it's exalted. And this is something that the placements of these, you need to kind of just memorize them. I mean, if Aries is ruled by Mars, it's dignified in Aries and Scorpio, but I'll just stick to Aries for now. But when you get into the exaltation position of certain planets, you just kind of need to memorize them. There's no real rhyme or reason as to why they're in certain signs, other than astrologers a long time ago determined that these were good placements to have it. So Mars operates well in Aries and Capricorn, and doesn't operate so well in Libra and works terribly, so to speak, in Cancer. It can't do Martian things in Cancer the same way it can do in Aries. So a Mars in Aries individual, and this is just me trying to like lay the groundwork and get everything very clear that even a beginner might understand what I'm trying to talk about. So Mars in Aries, Mars is a very kind of primal sign, primal planet, and Aries is a very straightforward sign. And so to get what an individual needs is very straightforward when it's in Aries versus when it's in Cancer. They kind of need to go a roundabout way for it, and sometimes they can't even get what they want directly, because Cancer can be kind of a passive sign. It's also more defensive than offensive, so it's very touchy, but it isn't kind of brash in the same way that it is in Aries. And so throughout my studies, one thing I've noticed is that when it comes to prediction, if there is a debilitated, so a planet that is in detriment or fall in a certain sign, so if it's debilitated and it's triggered by a progression or transit or solar arc or eclipse, the planets in detriment tend to do more harm than if they were in an exalted position. And that kind of makes sense based on even the wording that I'm using. But hypothetically, I'll use Mars as an example. Mars in Aries, if that's under a stressful transit, let's say Mars in Aries is square transiting Uranus in Capricorn, in predictive analysis, that's a difficult transit to have. But because Mars is able to be itself in Aries, it's not going to be too detrimental versus someone that has Mars in Cancer getting triggered by an opposition to Uranus in Capricorn. That is going to cause more stress because the Mars can't function properly to begin with. So that's just kind of where I was going with that. And regarding Charlie, he has a sun in Libra, which is in its fall position. And I think that's why Libras can kind of come off a bit uncanny and kind of there's something off about them because their life force, as everyone has, their life force and they're here for a reason. Libra's life is kind of directed towards other people and they feel like they have no solidarity with themselves because it's always everything about them is kind of conceding to other people's desires and other people's lives. So they get kind of sucked into other people's lives. Not all the time, but very generally. And it's because the sun can't do solar things in Libra very well. You know, again, people can express planetary energies differently. Astrology tends to be in extremes, so you can have someone that is very kind of like a very useless Sun in Libra individual, but you can also have someone that's very constructive because they're choosing to use it differently. Astrology, you can't get sometimes you can't get really nuanced with astrology. You kind of get one of two extremes. So with Charlie having his Sun in Libra, in its detriment position, it like I'm not getting into too much personality analysis with him, but when it was triggered by this Mars in Libra, where Mars is in its detriment in Libra, so both of these planets aren't operating very comfortably in this sign. Anytime he would have had his transiting Mars triggering his natal sun in Libra, I don't think this would have been anything. Um, the conjunction can go either way, but with him, because both of these planets aren't operating comfortably, every 2 years for him, I wonder if there's some kind of biography about the last 10 years of his life or something. It wouldn't surprise me if this 2 year cycle for him has actually been very difficult, or there's been some kind of difficulty in his life every time Mars conjuncts his sun. So people look, astrologers looking at this and saying he was assassinated because he had transiting Mars conjunct his sun, and Libra, Jupiter in Libra was there just amplifying this. This just makes it more violent. They're not getting it. Mars in Libra isn't violent. That's the problem. Mars in Libra can have a hard time standing up for itself. And when you're directed towards other people and Jupiter in Libra is there and you're naturally very kind of not hospitable, but you're very consensus orientated and it's being triggered by, or it's kind of being struck by two planets that aren't functioning well there, it's not going to be a disaster. But this doesn't mean an assassination at all. We don't know his ascendant degree. We don't know which planet represents him, his physical body. So yeah, any astrologer saying that this has anything to do with his, or you could predict his assassination with this aspect is a fucking idiot. Don't take them seriously. They have no idea what they're talking about. But the Mars being there does kind of would tell an astrologer that this could be a difficult time in maybe, the week leading up to, I think it was the 10th, and maybe a week after as well, just because the Sun and Mars don't operate super well in Libra. That could have been a problem. And then I also heard some people saying that he got assassinated because he had transiting Saturn opposite his natal Venus. And that has nothing to do with an assassination. This just tells, again, an astrologer that we don't know which house Venus rules in his chart. A very general consensus is that love gets kind of turned off around this time. Money stops flowing in. It's not a depressing time, but it becomes harder, and you're not feeling the love the same way you used to. But yeah, this has nothing to do with the assassination. But I will get into more specific detail regarding this placement soon. But yeah, that's just some things that I heard. And so if you're interested in astrology or you're just interested in what happened, can anyone predict this for him? I mean, maybe like a really good Vedic astrologer, maybe, because Vedic astrology, as far as I can tell, is more kind of black and white and outcome based and not so psychologically based as Western astrology is. But one big thing that again, you never hear people claiming to be astrologers talking about eclipses, and they are probably one of the most important things you need to learn about when you get into astrology. Eclipses are so sensitive, and they act like a Pluto transit or a Neptune transit. My teacher Maurice DeSimone referred to eclipses having the potential to act as a boss transit, which essentially is just like a huge change in your life. And you kind of hear that eclipses are so kind of nebulous to kind of understand, because people that talk about them, like me, have a hard time explaining exactly how they function. And so I'll just use his chart as an example. I'll keep going with it. On the 14th of March this year, he had, or everyone had, a lunar eclipse at 23 degrees of Virgo. And for eclipses, I'll use like a 5 degree orb, and I only look at the conjunction and the opposition. So he would have had an eclipse on his Venus, and an eclipse essentially is just like a very sensitive point for everyone, and those people that have planets on like on or around that degree, changes are going to happen for them, and eclipses happen in pairs, so you'll have them 6 months apart. No, they happen twice, and eclipses, they happen twice, one after the other, about 2 weeks, and then 6 months later, there's another set of eclipses, and sometimes they can correlate in the same signs, sometimes they're in different signs. But on the 14th of March, 2025, 23 degrees of Virgo became a sensitive point for everyone. As we can see, Charlie has Venus at 28 degrees of Virgo, And then on the 21st of September, so 11 days before he died, there will be a solar eclipse at 29 degrees of Virgo. Again, conjunct his Venus, closer to his Venus this time. And so we know, as astrologers, there's a 6 month window with a very sensitive degree for anyone that has a planet around 25 degrees of Virgo or Pisces. And eclipses, they kind of just open the doorway for things to manifest. You can have some difficult stuff going on in your astrology, for example, for years. Let's just say a year. Someone is having, difficult Saturn transits and Pluto transits, and sure, they're probably feeling a bit more down than usual, but nothing's really happening. And then all it takes is a 6 month window where an eclipse is hitting that area where it's already being kind of like assaulted by Pluto and thwarted by Saturn. An eclipse will happen, and then all of these events will kind of happen all at once, walloping the individual. And you'll notice that the public even gets really just weird around eclipse season. You'll hear that term a lot if you're interested in astrology. You'll hear eclipse season. That's that 2 week where you'll have the set of eclipses, and then 6 months later it'll be eclipse season again. And it probably has something to do with our body's connection to the moon. Like I know that the moon controls the tides of the ocean and controls the fluid in our bodies, and it's like it could just be a psychological thing as well. I'm not really sure, but eclipses make people act weird. And so there's something going on with his Venus, but again, we don't know what because we don't have his birth time. And another thing you can look for eclipse if you don't have birth time, just look for any eclipses happening around anyone's planets. Eclipses always bring big things. Like if you have like a celebrity that you like to follow and stuff, but you don't have any birth time for them and you're wondering what's going on in their life, if they have eclipses touching any of their personal planets, something's happening. And if you're like obviously a big fan of them, you can kind of connect the dots yourself. And some other transits he had going on. Oh, so I'll talk about that. The Saturn opposition. So Saturn in the sky retrograded back into Pisces. And he would have been experiencing this for the past like around the start of the first eclipse. So it's interesting it only manifested that we know of now. And remember how I said that around the 25-degree mark of Virgo or Pisces becomes very sensitive due to the eclipses. That Saturn entered that very sensitive space, and the eclipse kind of opened the doorway for something to happen. Again, I don't know how this would correlate to some kind of assassination because I don't have his birth time, but this would have been the manifestation of the loss of love, the loss of income, loss of popularity, something like that. So that is how the eclipses kind of opened the doorway for the Saturn opposite Venus to happen. He was also experiencing Jupiter in Cancer, transiting Jupiter in Cancer opposite his Uranus Neptune conjunction in Capricorn. Again, not a huge deal just because so many people around his age would be experiencing this transit as well. But if he was ruled by Uranus or Neptune or Jupiter, then it would become more important. Or if these planets were on an angle, ruling particular houses, like one of them ruling the eighth, for example, the eighth has to do with death. Then maybe you can make an assumption that he would be assassinated. And yeah, so another thing that I haven't heard any so-called astrologers talking about that have covered, this event, none of them have touched on his progress chart. And like progress charts with a birth time are going to be more helpful because you can have progressed aspects to the ascendant or midheaven, and you can look at progressed aspects to the moon as well. But we don't need his birth time to know that his progressed Mercury stationed direct this year. So he was born with this Mercury in Scorpio direct. When he was 12 years old, his progressed Mercury stationed retrograde, and then it stationed direct again. I don't know if I have the date written down. It would have stationed direct at some point this year. And so the way progressed planets work is like I use an ephemeris, like an analog one. And it's essentially like you take the date someone was born. Let's say someone was born on the 1st of November. I mean, it's kind of, can't really see it. Oh, sorry. 1st of November. you will count one day for each year of their life. So if you wanted to look at the progress aspects or um, progress placements for someone that was 20 years old and they were born on the 1st of November 2017, you would count to the 20th of November, which is when they'll be 20 years old. Oh, sorry, no, the 21st, because you wouldn't count the first year. So you would count one, or the 1st of November, that's when they're born. 2nd of November is 1 year old. 3rd of November would be 2 years old, and so on. And there's you can look this up online as well. This is just how you view progressions in a more easy to digest way, even though it doesn't sound like it. I can't really show you the visual aid. And so his progressed Mercury would have stationed retrograde when he was 12 years old. And when you think about Mercury and what Mercury retrograde kind of represents, it's like, Mercury is just the communicator. And when it's retrograde, most people, not most people, a lot of people have Mercury retrograde in their natal chart because Mercury goes retrograde every few months, and a few times out of the year as well. When someone's born with any planet retrograde, as an astrologer, it's telling me that that planet has something to say or it needs some kind of attention. He also has um, Saturn in Aquarius retrograde in his natal chart, which will tell an astrologist something very different to someone that has that planet direct in the same placement. Um, so, anyways, 12 years old, Mercury stations retrograde. He has Mercury in Scorpio natally. So this tells me he was focusing. Scorpio is a very focused sign, and Mercury is a very perceptive and research orientated planet. His focus was directed either internally or towards something else than it was the 12 years prior to its stationing retrograde. And with it stationing direct this year, Mercury has a lot to do with a collection of information as well. It's kind of telling me he, the way he was kind of, sorry, I'm getting thrown off by some sounds that were going on outside. He was kind of thrown off. No, I was thrown off. He was collecting all this information since he was 12 years old, and it's like he had the information and something changed with his perception of that information. And it really wouldn't surprise me if he got into politics when he was around. That's kind of young for me, but like if he was 12 years old when he got into politics, this would make sense. And then I'm not going to like try and tell you what I think happened, but just as an example, it's as if all the information he learned since he was 12 years old, he felt like was a lie, or he was not super interested in that type of information anymore, and he was ready to direct his perceptive talents elsewhere. His kind of point of focus changed, something like that. This anytime a planet stations retrograde or direct in a progress chart is a really big deal, and astrologers should be paying attention to that. And we don't need his birth time to tell us that it went retrograde around the past 12 months. No, it went station direct, sorry, around the past 12 months, because we can see that in the ephemeris, we can see it on software. You don't need a birth time to tell you this. So that's another kind of like thing that's kind of pinging my head, telling me again, this doesn't equate to him being assassinated. It tells me there was a big change regarding his perception and how he was kind of processing information in the past year that was different to how he's been processing the processing information in the past few years of his life since he turned 12. Um, and he also had transiting Uranus squaring his nodal axis. Uranus will be in Gemini. Um, no, sorry, not squaring it, conjunct his south node. Transiting Uranus is here, 1 degree of Gemini. You don't see it, but his south node would be here because his south node is 5 degrees of Sagittarius. And people always want to talk about how the eighth house is correlated with death, and it is. Also, is very common knowledge when you become more advanced in astrology that the nodal axis has a lot to do with death as well. It's kind of especially the south node, that can take you out of the world, whereas the north node tends to drive you towards your goals a lot of the time. The north node is like a very kind of insatiable point in the chart. You can never get enough of your north node. Whereas the south node is more about you've been there and you've done that and you're not that interested in it. But when the nodal axis is activated in any way, there can be major changes to the life just because, for example, him with Uranus conjuncting his south node in Gemini, again, Gemini's ruled by Mercury. There was a lot of mercurial kind of activation going on around this time for him. It tells me that maybe like not his beliefs necessarily, but the way he processed information, something about that was changing. That North Node in Sagittarius tells me that he was someone that could never get enough information. He could never get enough, what's the word? Like could never get enough, not facts, but like couldn't couldn't get enough of trying to formulate his own ideas through the information he was getting. And I wonder if that was actually kind of a problem with him and his career. Just because there's a lot of kind of like pivoting going on, whereas he should have been balancing between collecting information and being constructive with the information, and less about just being so insatiable for promoting the information he was given, something like that. And with Uranus conjuncting the South Node, that's telling me that there was a real shock to his kind of awareness of this. And Uranus can also deal with groups of people, and I wonder if he would have kind of changed camps. I'm pretty sure he was a Republican. I don't want to say he was going to be a Democrat, but it was kind of like with the progressed Mercury stationing direct as well. It was kind of like he could see clearly and had gained some kind of clarity and was kind of like, oh, I really don't align with this anymore. And but again, if your whole shtick is kind of believing one thing, how do you even go about changing that? Um, Maybe he was having issues with that. Who knows? But Uranus conjuncting his South Node tells me that, again, with the progressed Mercury stuff going on, tells me there was some kind of change to his mental processing. And again, this isn't related to the assassination. This is just kind of what was going on with him at this time. Um, yeah, so he was kind of he should have been gathering information and experiences and just kind of enjoying that process and not, yeah, trying to promote the beliefs that he got from that information, you know. And I know in his birth chart as well, he lacks fire. We don't need a birth time to tell us this. We can see he has no planets in fire. The nodes don't count. This ascendant doesn't count. It's just there. Nothing in fire. Hypothetically, he could have had a fire sign on the ascendant. He could also have a fire. I think it's more likely he had a fire sign on the midheaven, just because people that lack fire in their chart, if you lack any kind of element, you're obsessed with that element, and you need to get it from somewhere. So lacking fire tells an astrologer this person kind of, I personally am of the belief that people that lack fire in the chart, I don't mean to offend anyone by saying this, but they kind of need their hand held throughout their entire life because they're not able to just kind of be. They kind of need, a lot of the time they'll need something like organized religion to tell them what to believe, to tell them what is morally good. They don't really have that within themselves, and so people without fire can often marry a person that is very morally righteous or very religious, and they get that kind of that inspiration for life from the partner, or an exciting kind of partner, or they work in some kind of exciting job or job that is very like meaningful, in the sense of inspiration and things like that. So someone lacking fire, they're obsessed with that fire energy of just creating things and being proactive and just being, having that kind of lust for life in a way. And so when you're lacking that, but again, I don't know where the fire houses are in his chart, but it tells me that he was kind of obsessed with belief systems. And again, with the North Node in Sagittarius, that is telling me he was obsessed with promoting some kind of belief. And I know that that's what, I'm not grasping at straws by saying this. I know that's what he did for a living, which is why I think he probably has some kind of fire sign on the midheaven. But yeah, lack of fire and all this stuff in Libra. He's got a Libra moon. We know that. He's got the sun in Libra, conjunct Jupiter, again, like compounding all this Libra and stuff. He was a very kind of other people orientated, and yet there was this part of him that was insanely just focused. Probably kind of an arsehole as well, because people with Mercury and Scorpio tend to be arseholes, and then Mars and Scorpio there as well. Like, yeah, very kind of not private, but just there was a certain amount of depth to him, but then kind of glazed over with this superficiality of him kind of relating to others. It feels like he internally he felt more, like there was more depth to him than people really know. And yeah, he was I think probably trying to overcompensate with his lack of fire. Sorry, trying to overcompensate for his lack of fire with all of this I guess rhetoric. I don't know. I don't know what he did, but yeah, he has no fire, and then he also has no oppositions in his chart. And people without oppositions te can't see where other people are coming from. But again, being a Libra, he was so other people orientated, but there could be a selfish kind of aspect with that as well. So other people orientated because that's how he got his needs met, especially with that moon in Libra, like literally talking about his needs. But he was not actually like relating through others and not growing through others, not seeing himself mirrored through other people. Yeah, for all I know, he was probably using other people to gain some kind of safety or social insurance or something like that. Uh, but with the lack of oppositions, he wasn't actually learning through other people. He was very kind of self-contained and, again, probably a little bit psychic with the Mars and Mercury and Scorpio, just able to kind of pick up on the vibes. He had probably a good instinct about him as well. But yeah, probably didn't tell anyone about these instincts just because he was scared of being, shunned or judged or, something like that. And he also lacks, I forgot to bring out the notes for this video, so I'm trying to remember what I wrote down. He also had a lack of mutability in his chart, which again, when you're lacking something, you can kind of overcompensate for it. So he could have been more scattered in certain aspects of his life. We don't know the houses that are correlated, or we don't know where his mutable houses are, so to speak. So yeah, that's what I'm trying to remember about his general kind of personality makeup. But yeah, so oh, also he was likely in a new moon progressed lunation cycle because I like to talk about the progressed lunation cycle. We don't know when this happened. He could still technically have been in the balsamic phase, which is the end of the progressed lunation cycle, or he could have entered the new moon cycle at some point in the past 6-ish months, or he could have just, or he could be 6 months into his progressed new moon cycle. And again, this kind of just tells me that there were more changes going on with him. He had the progressed sorry, he had the progressed Mercury stationing direct, gaining some kind of clarity. He had the eclipses on his Venus, which is telling me the people he associates with, there's something going on with that. That becomes a sensitive point. He has Uranus conjunct his South Node, which is telling me that there's this real kind of shock to his system, and he's kind of having these revelations of maybe becoming more not insular, but kind of taking a step back a little bit and gathering more information. And oh, what did I just mention? The new moon, the progressed new moon. He was entering a new cycle in his life, and so again, none of this screams Charlie Kirk's gonna be assassinated, or this is how you can tell if you're gonna be assassinated. Whatever they're saying, whatever these people claiming to be astrologers are saying, you can't get that from astrology without a birth time. And even then, I don't think you can even get it from Western astrology. I think this is a Vedic thing. You should be consulting a Vedic astrologer if you want some kind of like black and white analysis of your birth chart. But yeah, so there were changes going on with him. That's all I can tell you. And it's like changes regarding potentially his career just because of the Mercury stuff. That's kind of what he did for a living. And his relationships because we're talking about Venus and, that Saturn opposition kind of cutting off the love. Yeah, and the new moon everything happening like that, he was entering a new season of his life that was different from how he's been living his life since he was 12 years old. And I know it's going to be awful for me to say, especially from like an earth perspective, an earthly kind of perspective. And because obviously he died too soon. He was very young. I think he was 31 years old. People want to say like, oh, um, yeah, he was gone too soon. From a soul perspective, this tells me, it's like screaming at me. He had all the information he needed. And I don't know if that's like he had all the information he needed, so we're cutting him off and, taking him off the planet, or he had all the information he needed, he's leaving and coming back and starting again. Because that's kind of my interpretation of how the soul tends to function. It will leave when it needs to, and then like we reincarnate and we come back with the lessons that we learned from the previous life and working all that stuff out. I don't really know. No one has the answer, but it's something like that. He has all the information that he needed, whether he was kicked off the planet or felt ready enough to kind of leave, and he's going to be coming back and doing something differently next time, regarding all this belief system stuff and the collection of information and something like that. So yeah, this was, I think, much more convoluted than I intended it to be. I wanted to make it really clear I did. But so yeah, any kind of astrologer that's telling you on YouTube or TikTok, any kind of like pop culture thing that they're kind of set, like they're trying to tell you you can predict this by some random transit happening in some random house that they don't even know because there's no birth time. Absolutely ridiculous. An astrologer, likely a Western astrologer, cannot determine if someone is going to die based on that individual's chart alone. You can kind of tell based on the family's chart. Another reason how I knew I didn't have cancer was because it wasn't really reflected in my husband's chart or my son's chart. But yeah, astrologers, they're full of shit. You need to do like an actual kind of vetting process on the astrologer you're potentially going to hire. If you want like a $50 reading from someone, then that's fine. If you're going to invest heavily into an astrologer and make them your kind of put them on your payroll, so to speak, like make sure you're hiring someone that actually knows what they're doing and has integrity in their job. And I'm not saying that has to be me. I'm not saying I'm the most like perfect person, perfect astrologer out there, but like I'm personally not going to lie to my clients to make them feel better. I'm not going to grasp at straws to tell people what they want to hear. I'm not trying to, siphon money out of people. It's just if people like the way that I work and whatever, they can hire me. But I'm sick of these people giving astrology a bad name, giving astrologers a bad look. I'm just kind of done with it. And yeah, again, there was like 6 or 7 videos kind of yeah, grasping at straws, saying things that didn't even correlate to the actual astrology that was happening. And I'm just kind of sick of it. And I really didn't want this video to be like super negative and me nagging. It was just, I'm just kind of done with it. And yeah, so if you don't have someone's birth time, look for eclipses, look for progressed aspects to their natal chart, but don't look at the moon if you don't have the birth time. Progress aspects to the natal chart and progressed planets stationing direct or retrograde, and major planets to personal planets, major transiting planets to personal planets in the natal chart. And especially if there was an eclipse 6 months before or 6 months after that, when that transit is active, check to see like an opening for when things can actually start to manifest. But yeah, I hope this was informative and I'll see you in my next video. Bye.